Good evening, everyone. We're going to call this committee of the whole to order. We are just waiting on Councillor Zelka. Councillor Green is joining us remotely through electronics, but just we have a fairly tight time schedule for our presenters, so I think we'd like to just kick this off and get to it. So with that, I'll call the meeting to order. As I do so, I just want to acknowledge that we're gathering on the traditional territories of the Coast and the Strait Salish peoples. Specifically, we recognize the Lekwungen-speaking people known today as the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nations, and that their historic connections to these lands and these waters continue to this day. We have an agenda. If we can just get a motion to approve the agenda, moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you. Then we have adoption of the minutes of the Committee of the Whole of March 21st, and then the Special Committee of the minutes of the 24th and 19th. We'll do them all together. Moved and seconded. Any discussions, changes, corrections, amendments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. We are now on to our first agenda item, which is the overview of tsunami hazard exposure. We have Mr. Ford with Associated Engineering here to present. Now, I believe, understand.
That's correct, yes. And Chief McDonald is here to lead first.
Fantastic. So I'm going to invite our Fire Chief, McDonald, here to introduce, and then we'll have David Ford join us. Chief McDonald, welcome.
Mayor Murdoch, we seem to have some have lost contact with the chief momentarily, so we're hoping that he's going to be with us in a moment.
I'll keep an eye on him here. Thanks. Yeah, I got him here. Thank you. Hello, Chief McDonald. We are just introducing this item. So I thought, could you please just give us an overview of this and introduce Mr. Ford?
Okay, can you hear me, Your Worship?
We can. Can you speak up just a little bit?
Okay, thank you. Hopefully this works. Sorry, I had got terminated from my Teams or from my Zoom, had to log back in. So good evening, Your Worship and members of council. This evening we have a presentation on updated tsunami modeling for the District of Oak Bay. This presentation is derived from the most recent Capital Region flood mapping project and is being delivered by Mr. David Ford, who is a coastal engineer with Associated Engineering. Associated Engineering was also secured by the Capital Regional District to support the CRD flood mapping project from 2019 to 2021. And the intent of the presentation is to inform councils on changes to the related tsunami modeling prior to releasing this information and supporting public education to the public through the emergency program. The release and distribution of the updated information is in coordination with regional emergency programs, and the focus is really on public education as opposed to land use planning elements, which are included in various other areas of the sea level rise study that the CRD study supported. I can also say that Mr. Ford, it's important to note, has a hard stop of 6:40 this evening. And he will be available to answer questions following this presentation. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Ford to get going with the presentation. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Chief McDonald, and we will keep you to your time schedule, Mr. Ford, and welcome to our meeting.
Thank you so much. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. And my apologies for the availability tonight. I'm double booked with another municipality, so unfortunately I will have to cut things as we said around 6:40ish, but I'll be happy to answer any questions after the fact. So as Frank was saying, this leads from our project from 2020/2021 for the Capital Regional District. The presentation tonight is just an overview of the tsunami hazard exposure for the municipality, AE, and our project partners DHI and Westmar Advisors were the project team, but primarily the contributors to tonight's presentation. It was a collaborative effort between myself and Dr. John Clegg at Westmar Advisors and Simon Fraser University, who is kind of one of the preeminent geohazard specialists locally in BC. So just to give a brief outline of the presentation, just going to talk about the topography and exposure to coastal flood hazard in general terms. Then I'll talk specifically about what we termed our task 3, which was the tsunami hazard modeling. I'll talk about the difference between our project and the previous 2013 CRD project that some people may already be familiar with in terms of its outputs. I'll talk about the contemporary tsunami science, just where that kind of sits. And then I'll talk about traditional coastal storm or sea level rise flooding. That was task 2 in our project. So that's when people talk about, you know, extreme sea levels, high tides, etc., flood construction levels. That's generally what we're kind of referring to. And I'll also talk about some of the tsunami mapping products that we derived as a result of our work. So I'm sure everybody on this meeting is very familiar with the district's topography, but just to kind of hammer home some kind of key points, much of the municipality is above kind of the 6-meter contour. It's a relatively high or elevated municipality. There's some very distinct areas, all right, where there is low topography or lower lying areas. Of kind of particular focus would be the kind of what we've termed that McNeil Avenue corridor, essentially between McNeil Bay and Oak Bay Marina. And that'll become a little bit more important or pertinent as we step through the results. Just for clarity as well, the TRs and the lines, the yellow lines that you see, they're just transects that we've used in our study, which are cross sections or profiles through the foreshore and offshore bathymetry and onshore topography. We use that in terms of conducting our analyses, our coastal analyses. So task 3 and tsunami hazard modeling. I've selected kind of the 3 most pertinent or interesting, let's say, events that we modeled. We modeled actually 11 different scenarios / sources in our modeling efforts. These are a selection of kind of the 3 most interesting ones, I would say, that give probably the largest results. The Cascadia subduction zone is the subduction zone, or essentially the seismic area offshore of Vancouver Island that extends from the north of the island all the way down to kind of central Oregon, northern California. It's where the Juan de Fuca plate kind of meets the American plate and the Pacific plate. They're all kind of converging, and one plate is subducting or basically dipping under another, and that creates an accumulation of strain. And once that strain or stress gets released, that's what causes an earthquake. And that earthquake, obviously, that seismic shake shakes the volume of water offshore, and that results in a transfer of energy and essentially a tsunami. So the scenario on the left, the Cascadia subduction zone L1 scenario, is kind of the theoretically highest or worst case earthquake scenario. It's a full length rupture, which is a magnitude 9.1 to 9.2 event. It has a return period of approximately 2,500 years. The middle scenario is the Cascadia subduction zone northern segment event, and that is, just as the name suggests, a rupture of the northern segment or the northern portion of the Cascadia subduction zone. It has a magnitude of about 8.5 to 9, and it has an estimated return period of about 500 to 600 years. And when people talk about the big one, that's usually the event that they mean. And just a little bit of quick trivia, it's estimated that there's a 1 in 3 chance of this event happening in the next 50 years. We're overdue a similar sized seismic event, essentially based on the tsunamigenic records, which are essentially soil deposits along beaches and lower lying areas in the Pacific Northwest where you can kind of trace tsunami history based on marine silt and marine soils that have washed ashore during a tsunami. And then the situation or the scenario on the right-hand side is what's called the Devil's Mountain source or fault. That's a shallow crustal fault. Think the San Andreas Fault in Los Angeles. That has a theoretical kind of upper bound magnitude of 7.5 and has an estimated return period of 2,000 years. It's not as well studied or as well understood yet as the Cascadia subduction zone, but for a variety of sources and to kind of help give the CRD as much information as possible, Dr. Clegg and our colleagues in the University of Delaware who were doing the modeling kind of decided to include this. It would be a cool event to include in our results and our science. So what do these events look like in terms of modeling results? So this is what kind of the inundation and depths look like for the three different scenarios that we just discussed. You can see the L1 scenario on the left-hand side, that 2,500 year return period results in that McNeil Avenue, that kind of connection between McNeil Bay and the Oak Bay Marina joining. And similarly, you can see up in Cabra Bay, there is a significant inundation and depth as well as a result of that scenario. Bearing in mind that that is kind of the upper order 2,500 year return period event. The middle event is the 500 year return period. Let's term it a more realistic tsunami or something that has been experienced in recent stratigraphic records or soil deposits. And that leads to a little bit of inundation along the shoreline within Oak Bay, but is primarily more pronounced in Cadborough Bay. And similarly, the Devil's Mountain Fault on the right-hand side results in a significant amount of inundation and depth in Cadborough Bay, and beginning to see that kind of McNeil Avenue, Oak Bay Marina, McNeil Bay corridor developing. And that's due to the position and orientation of the Devil's Mountain Fault as well. The municipal staff have access to all of these results, and I believe they've been kind of churning through and doing their own research as well as talking to us. But again, we can dive into as much detail as you guys require, kind of a QA session at the end of this, as well as, you know, after the fact, and I'll get back on any queries. So the question that kind of is the big thing that the municipal staff, and Frank in particular, the chief, wanted to bring out in this presentation was, why are our results different to what was done in 2013? Basically, a big factor in this is that you're not perfectly comparing apples with apples. Very different projects, very different objectives, and different methodologies and different information that was used to feed both modeling projects. So for example, the 2013 project looked at a single 500-year return period event using a different seismic methodology source or different seismic information. We looked at 11 different scenarios, and our modeling was fed by recent source description or earthquake descriptions, let's say, from the Washington Geological Survey and the Oregon Department of Geology and Mineral Industries, DOGAMI is the acronym. So we wanted to try and keep it as consistent with our friends to the south as much as possible. Another big difference between both projects was the modeling resolutions. Generally speaking, our project, the 2020 project, has a finer resolution, particularly in Oak Bay, where we've used a 4-meter grid cell, and that just basically means that in the model there is an elevation value at every 4-meter by 4-meter cell or rectangle. So you get results every 4 meters by 4 meters, and it passes water from every 4 meters by 4 meters to the adjacent cell. In the 2013 project, that resolution was 90 meters, I believe, in Oak Bay's instance. And another big difference is that in the 2013 project, there was a public safety factor applied, which basically increased the results by 50% to account for uncertainties in the modeling methodology and data preparation, etc. But if you kind of strip that back and look at the underlying model performances, the University of Delaware professors who worked on this, Dr. Jim Kirby and Dr. Shee, who are the primary modelers, they're very happy with the comparison between the 2020 project and the 2013 project in terms of water levels offshore of Victoria. So in that kind of the Juan de Fuca Strait area, as it begins to curve inwards into the Salish Sea and up towards the Saanich Peninsula. So again, just to bear in mind that it's not perfectly comparing apples with apples between both projects. Another thing to flag is the use of the L1 source, which is the 2500 year return period earthquake event or seismic event. Basically, to boil this text down, what's on the screen is to summarize that the science may be moving away from the use of that source as a potential tsunami model source. There is an interest in testing the kind of source description now. 3 years ago, it represented the kind of cutting edge, or the bleeding edge of potentially the upper order event on the Cascadia subduction zone. Interestingly enough, it is really difficult to explain how Japan experienced the same tsunami in the year 1700 as we did here locally, without this worst case tsunami event, this 2500 year event. So I think there's a little bit more science and more investigation and review of this source that needs to be done, but we still believe it prudent for inclusion because it is a conservative scenario, or represents kind of the theoretical upper limit or upper order of what would be possible in terms of a local tsunami event. And just to note that, earthquake science is not exact. Seismic science, seismology, and the description of these faults and subduction zones is not perfect. It's continuously advancing and evolving. And, people in the University of Victoria and Simon Fraser University and other institutions are doing great work with NRCan, Natural Resources Canada, in continued study and refinement of these sources. Then just to quickly move on to task 2 of our work, which was coastal storm or relative sea level rise study. This is the conventional sea level rise flooding, the coastal storm flooding that people are most familiar with. We actually did some detailed inundation modeling for Oak Bay. You can actually see the model on the left hand side. That's the actual topography and bathymetry for the municipality and the local area. And we plugged in boundary conditions that you can see on the right hand side. Essentially, hydrographs are basically water level and time relationships that you can plug in, and the model is able to simulate the spread or the flow of water across the model domain. So this is an example of a result for a 200-year, 1 meter relative sea level rise scenario. So a lot of people are kind of familiar with the shorthand 1 meter by the year 2100. Again, climate change projections, sea level rise projections are ever changing, depending on the case of the science at any one time. But the local accepted kind of convention is 2100, 1 meter relative sea level rise. So you can see that just by Oak Bay Marina, you're getting inundation during that 200-year event. And then with respect to 2 meters worth of relative sea level rise, you can see that McNeil Avenue corridor developing. So obviously you're getting inundation from McNeil Bay to the south and Oak Bay Marina to the north. And then just finally, an example of one of the tsunami mapping products that we produced last year. This is a map of, let's say, areas outside of the maximum tsunami inundation zone. So the hatched green lines represent areas that are above or outside the, let's say, the Cascadia subduction zone L1 scenario, as well as all of the other model scenarios that we looked at. So we combined all of the tsunami scenarios into kind of one data set and said, okay, if you're outside of that data set, you're in a green polygon. Otherwise, you're within a tsunami zone or a tsunami mapped area. So you can see that that McNeil Avenue corridor, obviously, because it's able to exchange flow under the 2500 year scenario, that hasn't been hatched green. So with that, that's kind of the end of a very brief and whistle-stop tour of our work. I know that's a significant amount of information to throw at you guys, and apologies. Happy to answer any questions right now, or if Frank wanted to expand a little bit on what I've said. But yeah, I'll answer anything in the coming days as much as I can.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to go to questions here. Councillor Green, I saw your hand go up. I'm going to try and keep our time to about 2 minutes a councillor, so we can get through. Everybody have a chance to ask a question and get through in the time that Mr. Ford has left. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the presentation. And I just wondered, what is the concept of shared planning with municipalities and the CRD? What is it that municipalities can actually do to mitigate in the eventuality of this kind of climate, I would say catastrophe, I guess. I hope that's not too strong a word, but is there a plan going forward to help us with this kind of planning and mitigation? Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Ford, what is done with this data at this point?
So I'm sure there's municipal staff on the call that may be in a better position for me or than me to answer that. But from our perspective, when we handed over the information, we made a couple of blanket recommendations with respect to, for example, if you were to incorporate tsunami inundation or tsunami wave heights into flood construction level practices or planning practices, this is potentially an event, or this is potentially how you would tackle it. But I do know that there is committees of municipal staff made up of all of the different municipalities, the 13+3, that are essentially distilling this information and trying to homogenize it across the capital region as much as possible. But I'm not privy to a lot of those discussions. I'm sure Frank and his colleagues have their ear closer to the ground on that one.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank
Chief
you, Mr.
McDonald,
Ford.
you wanted to add something?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just to clarify, there's obviously a lot of information here, and I think one of the key pieces to reinforce is the sea level rise study, or the coastal flood mapping project, had three sort of key components of it, and the first two are more related to the sea level rise and more of a land use planning piece, and the third part of it was tsunami inundation study. And so the local emergency programs are really focused on the tsunami inundation piece, which is what we're talking about here tonight. So it's less, it's the two pieces go hand in hand, but from a land use perspective, the emergency programs definitely working closely with our colleagues in planning and engineering. But the real focus of tonight is how do we get this information out to the public and provide education to them. And that's what across the region, all of the emergency programs have been working quite a bit over processing the data and the planning and coming up with the mapping so that we can then provide this information to the public. And then it's making sure that part 1 and 2 of the sea level rise study don't get lost. And that's that's a big a big piece for all the planning staff across the region to really collaborate on, but not in a position to comment specifically on that tonight.
Thank you. And thank you, Chief McDonald. Are there any other questions of Mr. Ford? Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you so much for the presentation. Apologies to all that I was a few minutes late. I've been following this work very, very closely, the coastal flood planning work done at the CRD level, and I much appreciate the presentation that was given. I've also been following at times when we have proponents coming forward, for example, in the uplands or along the water, it seems to be currently at the discretion of the building inspector is the request for a geotech analysis to geotech report to come up with the local flood construction level for that particular property. And I've been noticing that over the years that number has been getting larger and larger. And I do notice that for the flood construction levels in not only this report, but also the ones that are up on the CRD website, the numbers appear to be getting into the 5-meter range. I was wondering if you could just share what sort of planning should we be considering, what sort of a timeline in particular? Is it a say 75 years out or 100 years out or 200 years out for when a proponent comes forward, please?
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. I'm not sure we have the staff on this call to answer that particular question, but Mr. Ford, perhaps you can talk a little bit about anything on your side of the table.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, so I'd caveat everything by saying that as like an external consultant, we can only advise. The legal responsibility with respect to setting and selecting flood construction levels lies with the individual municipalities under the flood hazard land use management guidelines that were amended in 2018. So there is a very kind of prescribed list of stuff that, that need to be ticked off depending on the type of development that occurs. But the means by which you can calculate or estimate rather flood construction levels and setbacks is flexible enough so that individual consultants, depending on the scope or their objective, can kind of pick different methodologies to suit, budget, scope, area, availability of data, etc. So, for example, in individual site applications, there may be limited scope available or limited budget available to come up with flood construction levels analyses, and that can sometimes push us as an industry to a more conservative answer or more conservative practice. With respect to the estimation of flood construction levels in our reporting, we've primarily focused on the flood construction levels associated with coastal storm flooding or just sea level rise flooding in general. We have not recommended anything or calculated anything or estimated anything with respect to tsunami risk. Despite it being flagged as a consideration in the flood hazard land use management guidelines, we have not made a recommendation. We have said potentially this Cascadia subduction zone northern segment event is a good standard to adopt, and basically you pick which risk governs. Is it the 200-year coastal storm, or is it the 500-year tsunami? And that's been kind of our recommendation for the capital region as a whole. But each municipality will need to make a decision for themselves in terms of how they would implement something like that or something similar locally. To my mind, or to the best of my knowledge, I don't believe any municipality locally has a defined tsunami flood hazard bylaw that I know of, or a specific tsunami development permit area. I don't know if it has been implemented yet.
Thank you, Mr. Ford.
Yep.
Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you so much, and thanks so much for the presentation. It was fascinating. My question is, when I look at one of the maps, I think I'm on the one that has CSZ-L1 and CSZ-NS, and it shows on the L1 map the the McNeil Bay flood area. But I'm looking at the NS map, and I'm looking at Gonzales Bay, and I'm wondering if there's a threat of flooding coming into the municipality from that side, as well as as well as McNeil Bay. Would there be any threat from anything coming from Gonzales, or do we know that?
Yeah, so we do know that. I think I haven't extended the image far enough left for the L1 scenario, I think is what you're getting at there, is that I've cut the image off on the left. I wouldn't have done that if there was anything interesting to the left of the image, but I can double check and follow up for you, but I'm sure municipal staff would be able to answer that question right off the
Thank you.
the bat as well. Yeah.
No, I think the answer was great. We got a few chuckles in here, but you wouldn't have cut it off if there was anything interesting. So
Yeah, yeah, just this big wall of water.
we just won't talk about that one. Yes, right.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions of Mr. Ford at this time? Nope. Anything else around the table? No. I will just express my thank you. I guess one question that was sort of nagging at my brain on this one was just the I guess it's the DM1, the Devil's Mountain Fault, which has by far the best name of the bunch, I have to say. In that case, it'd be so close to us. I would assume that the bigger threat at that point would really would be the earthquake itself if it was that large, because it's essentially immediately adjacent.
Yeah, so this is where it gets a little bit sticky. It is extremely close, and we've modeled we know the travel times as well from our modeling. So kind of general rule of thumb, you'll feel the Cascadia subduction zone, and it takes about an hour to about 80 minutes for that first wave to move from offshore through Juan de Fuca Strait and into the Salish Sea, essentially up around Saanich Peninsula. With respect to Devil's Mountain, it would take 5 to 10 minutes for that wave to move from its source to essentially where Oak Bay is. But I would say this is kind of, to the best of my knowledge again, this is the bleeding edge of this hazard and how it's been modeled. I don't know if it has been modeled like this before. And when we were selecting that particular source, the Devil's Mountain source, we know that the science has not been as well or rigorously studied that I know of as compared to the Cascadia subduction zone. The Cascadia subduction zone is a much better understood seismic hazard as well as tsunami source relative to the Devil's Mountain fault.
Thank you. And
Yeah.
worth noting publicly, that's a 1 in 2,000 year event. So just to put that in some perspective. Any other questions, Mr. Ford, before we let him go? I don't see any. Thank you very much, Mr. Ford, and for your presentation. I wouldn't mind just a motion to receive the report, moved and seconded. Any other discussion here? Don't see any. Thank you very much. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? That concludes. We got you out of here with 6 minutes to spare, Mr. Ford. Enjoy your next meeting.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, if there's any other questions, please forward them to me. All good. Thank you
Very
so
good.
much.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Absolutely. Go
If I
ahead,
may,
Councillor Zelka.
the questions of staff related to this material, just was wondering if, in terms of next steps for this staff use, will this be forwarded to the Oak Bay Emergency Program for use maybe as a hazard risk and vulnerability assessment input or something along those lines? Just wondering.
Yeah, that was the impression I had from Chief McDonald's comments, but Chief McDonald, perhaps you could just flesh that out a little bit about how this is used with the Emergency Operation Program.
Yes, thank you, Worship. So first off, like I alluded to earlier, the initial intent is trying to disseminate this information to the public. So there's been done in a variety of different ways. So we've actually got GIS mapping that is able to allow us to drill down to the individual civic address to identify each property that is located within the hazard planning zone within the entire district. So we will be generating a mail out letter, which will provide direct notification to all the residents that reside in the hazard area. We're also developing a public education brochure, which has been developed or renewed in concert with all the local governments and electoral areas within the Capital Regional District, so that it's specific to each district. As Mr. Ford indicated, the long-standing sort of plan used to be based on a 4-meter safe elevation. That has now been effectively removed across the region, and it's now down to more district by district planning information to provide updated information to our residents. So that's coming out, as well as there is a new interactive map that the Capital Regional District staff have generated. So it allows people to actually log into a web browser and drill down and see, right down to the property line, or anywhere else they are, for that matter, to get updated information with regards to where an inundation area is. And that's just the coordination piece about getting this information out. But as far as what the next steps look like, these studies typically are every sort of 5 to 7 years. So as Mr. Ford indicated, there's ongoing changing evolution in the science here. So we're sort of mid-cycle with regards to when we'll start another study. And then there's a lot of work that obviously has to occur with regards to engaging other departments within the municipality. But what are we doing with this information more in the aspect of land use planning? I wouldn't say we've got a concrete plan there, but it's definitely on the radar screen. As we're all aware, there's been quite a turnover of senior staff. So we need to have a little bit of time to circle the wagons here in that regard, but it's definitely on the radar screen to make that an initiative.
Thank you very much. I don't see other questions here, so with no other pieces, we'll just move on to the next item on the agenda. Thank you very much, Chief McDonald, for the presentation and for bringing this for our information to the public's information. Sobering, but very interesting information. Up next, we have Mayor and Council verbal reports. We're just going to go around the table and allow everybody at the table here, just if there's anything you want to update the public or fellow members of council that you've been working on. For the public's benefit, all of our councillors participate in various committees and other groups around the region on behalf of the district as part of their council duties, and this is just a chance to provide a brief update to members of council and to the public of things that might be of interest. So I'm happy to go around the table, but before I do that, I just wouldn't mind taking this opportunity just to recognize Victoria McKean, who's here as one of our administrative assistants and legislative assistants, and just does a fantastic job for us behind the scenes. Has got an amazing opportunity with an NGO in far-flung parts of the world, but we're really going to miss her, and she's done an amazing job of upping the level of professionalism, responsiveness, and fun for the organization as a whole. So thank you, Ms. McKean, and thank you for all the work that you've done here. And we're going to miss you, but we look forward to seeing you when you come back eventually. So thank you. So I'll just go around the table for to members of council. Councillor Green, do you want to go first, since you're bright and cheery on my screen here?
Thank you very much. Sorry if you see me swatting, but there's a huge mosquito in the room. I just wanted to let council know that I attended this month so far the TTAC meeting at the beginning of May, the Arts Commission meeting for the CRD, the Tourism Committee meeting where they went through their mission and value statements, etc. I attended the Art Show at Monterey, the Community Association of Oak Bay event on housing, and finally Earth Day at Uplands Park. And thank you very much. And I'm sorry that I'm not there tonight and unable to attend other events recently, but as you know, we have COVID in the house. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Green. I'll just go around the table if that's amenable to people. Councillor Patterson, can I start at your end?
Thank you, Mayor. I will just say that maybe a quick update on the Victoria Family Court Youth Justice Committee. I am the liaison to that. In 2020, the CRD Governance Committee initiated a review of Victoria Family Court and Justice Committee and approved subsequently in February 2022, they approved bylaw 4453 to continue supporting the committee as a delegated commission of the CRD. The committee, just for those who don't know, was established originally in 1967 and is guided by federal and provincial legislation. Now includes all of the members of the CRD and San Juan Island. And so going through this, we have been undertaking strategic planning, undertaking succession planning, and a new working model. I have been, in that effort, I have been chairing the succession meetings working group, and I'm now working on the experience matrix. The federal and provincial legislation requires that members serve without remuneration and have experience in education, health, probation, and welfare. And we look at that in the broader scope of those terms. So I expect once we finish the work on the matrix and it is approved by the Victoria Family Court and Youth Justice Committee, that then we will follow the guidance of that and look at the experience relative to the existing committee and what is needed on that. And I will be coming back at that time, I think, to Oak Bay Council just for discussion on representation of this district from our council, because there will be some decisions about that. There is no requirement that it be a council appointed member. It can be a member of the community too. So it's quite interesting work. I perhaps am not as adept as some of the resource members who have extensive backgrounds in this, but it's very interesting, and I think will serve the communities very well. And there's a CREST board meeting. I also serve as the liaison to CREST, and we are having our AGM on Wednesdays. So the annual report was put out, and there's nothing really to update on that committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Patterson. Go ahead, Councillor Day.
Yeah, just very quickly, I'm council liaison to the SIPS committee, and don't really have much to report out. I've kept council up to date with the latest recordings and news items that SIPS has done over the last while, but not much to report in terms of actions right now. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you so much, Chair. Two things to report with respect to the Regional Water Supply Commission that I serve on behalf of Oak Bay. The Oak Bay is not the only one who does master service plans. The Water Supply Service is also coming or updating its master plan for 2022 and seeking public input. It's a fascinating service, and I encourage everyone to go take a look, since they would love the public's feedback on that. Also, to make the water service visible to everyone, there are water tours of the closed-off area in the Souk Hills, the areas that you normally can't go into. Tours are available in the month of June. They're filling up fast, and I definitely encourage the public to sign up for the tickets. It's a fascinating system, and we're very lucky to have it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Zelka. Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Worship. Just updating council in my capacity as trustee with the Greater Victoria Public Library Board. Very significant event and a long time in coming, and a highlight for the community is the opening of a new branch. Council may be aware that the new Esquimalt branch of the public library just opened just a couple of weeks ago. They had their soft launch and then the opening event. If you haven't had the chance to, if you find yourself in that part of the world and want to check it out, I'd recommend it. It is of particular relevance to Oak Bay because it reflects the type of renewal and the type of community branch that might be evidenced in a reconstruction or a rebuild of the Oak Bay branch at some point in the future. So it really evidences what a modern library space looks like, in the same vein as the Shawantang Ho James Bay branch that opened a number of years ago, but is a little bit bigger, so is a little bit more representative of what a size facility that the Oak Bay would look like. And also of interest is, council may be aware that the City of Victoria has resourced and begun a feasibility study process for the potential replacement of the main branch of the public library. So evaluating options for essentially where that might be located and what the future of that existing building might be. So as council may be aware, that the main branch of the public library was actually intended to be a bit of a temporary stop. It was not intended to be used as long as it has been. So the feasibility study is a long time in coming and definitely much valued. And in addition to that, the public library is engaged in rolling out its strategic bridging plan, a 2-year strategic plan. And everything is right on schedule in that regard. And then I would also just report back on my role as liaison with the Heritage Foundation, which has a number of different initiatives underway. The agenda seems to be getting longer all the time, and there's lots of different subcommittees working on things, but most significantly, for the public's knowledge, the foundation is planning to once again return and provide an educational opportunity at the Oak Bay night markets, which are, is a highlight for them, and I think a great opportunity for the community to engage with their work. So that will return again, and we're all excited about the night market. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor. You did a better job than I ever did at pronouncing the Stronghunkto James Bay Ranch, so well done. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thanks. And just as Councillor Appleton brought up the night markets, I know that Councillor Green and I were going to let everybody know that the night markets are starting on the second Wednesday of June, July, August, and September, I believe, starting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So that'll be wonderful. Also, Arts Alive should be coming out. The new Arts Alive pieces should be coming out relatively soon. I think we have 9 new pieces coming out. We will also have Music in the Park starting, I believe there's one at the end of June. I'll find out the correct date for that, but it will be coming as well. And then Council will have noted in their emails that on April 25th, they would have received an email from the Royal McPherson Theatre Society in regards to the Stantec engineering studies from 2017 and 2020. And I would encourage you to read those, and any questions, you can reach out to Mr. Labasse, and he would be happy to answer any questions for you. And then the MTS AGM happened a week ago, and just to let you all know that they are looking at raising capital for deferred renovation projects, and they will probably be coming to council. They're going to be looking at, just to let council know, they're going to be looking at ways to raise the capital, whether that's coming to their community partners, doing grants, or looking at fundraising. So yes, they'll probably be coming to present to us at some time in the near future. And just a reminder that the Yes Awards are on May 31st. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Thank you all for covering all of those very important pieces. A very quick update. Many members of council were able to attend the launch of a new search and rescue boat put on by our volunteers group. And we had the chance of acknowledging the many hours of volunteerism and everything that went into that, both the fundraising and of course all of the actual volunteering of being on that boat. So thanks to everyone who was able to make that event and to all of the people involved in that wonderful organization. Very exciting to see that new boat in the water. I was also able to attend the change of command ceremony this morning for Rear Admiral Topshee, who is moving off to Vancouver, or to Ottawa, to take over as head of the Navy. So very exciting for that. Though very cold on the water, I have to say, with the wind. Also, I think pretty much every member of council was attending at the attended the Cool Kit kickoff. So this is a piece to train the trainer. Getting the community involved in educating and updating, and so that's very exciting that first session happened. I want to express my appreciation to all of council for their support and to the many volunteers who have offered up their time for that. Just a heads up that we had a committee of the whole at the CRD last week, and really just to review our strategic plan and the priorities, and really just reinforce those priorities in terms of what has been going on in the development of the housing and the other pieces that are as part of that. So no dramatic changes. So I'm sure you're all on the edge of your seats to find out what happened. And last but not least, we also had a planning session at the Victoria Regional Transit Commission, which is looking at the next 5 to 10 years. Obviously, an organization that's quite dramatically impacted by COVID. Probably that and public transit and tourism, probably the two most impacted industries with COVID, and still a substantial lag in terms of getting ridership back, but very promising signs, and certainly lots of exciting pieces happening too. We had a very aggressive plan of growing the service hours in this area and moving to newer technologies of electricity and so forth. So, getting that back onto that timeline is really critical. And so it was a good working session, and certainly will lead to some pretty significant investments and so forth with the partnership of our province and federal governments as well, because they're critical partners in that piece. So those are my updates in terms of things that have gone on. Thank you for that. Anything else that people have thought of? Because sometimes when we're talking, we jog our memories of other activities that have gone on. What's that? Yeah. Very good. So then we're just moving on to public comment and question period. We have, I think, a couple of members who have registered to speak. This is for those who are interested in watching or watching on the live stream. Perhaps you can put up the 1-855 number with the call-in details. But we allocate up to 30 minutes at every meeting to the public who wish to address us on issues related to Oak Bay. And we allow up to 3 minutes per speaker, and really topics are open. At Committee of the Whole, it's not such an issue, but at the other meetings of council, we tend to make sure that we're clear that we're not talking to specific land use applications, because those are dealt with through a separate process. So with that, I'm going to invite our first guest who's here and with us in person. If you could just state your name and municipality of residence, and I will keep track of the time, and welcome. Oh, sorry, can you push the button on the front, just the middle in the middle, yep. There you go.
Mayor, committee, thank you for having me. My name is Josh Califf. I'm a resident of Oak Bay. Recently, I've purchased a property on Oak Bay Avenue at 2120 Oak Bay Avenue. And just recently, I've been given notice by the hair salon that they will no longer be occupying that business, and in exchange for 2 months free rent, I'm now the new owner of this salon. I'm just looking to possibly engage with Oak Bay Council to discuss the parking in the front of the property at 2120. At this moment, there's the existing white pylons, which I believe were placed for COVID reasons, which I understand for social distancing, for walking. But I have noticed in other areas of Oak Bay where there's businesses that the white pylons do not exist. I'm requesting that at least in 3 or 4 stalls that the white pylons be removed for access to the hair salon. From talking to the previous owners, there's a fair amount of clients that are older that may need access from the street, and it's affected their business, but also just getting access to the business from the street is a lot easier for a lot of people. On a personal level, my daughter and mother live in the building now, and if you're familiar with that, with the driveway down, it's easement that's shared between the dentist on the corner, and it's creating a lot of, at this moment, there's a lot of parking there is a few stalls for clients to come to the salon, but it creates a lot of bottleneck, and in some ways a little dangerous, cars coming up and down that driveway, entering the building, but also leaving towards the street. I don't know if there's been any issues in the last couple of years with cars coming into the driveway, into the sidewalk, and into the street from the building. But from the time I've been there, it's felt a little, in some ways, dangerous, not just for pedestrians, but for cars and coming in and out. So I have received emails from council that there's no plan to remove these pylons, but my request is to possibly re-entertain at least this area of Oak Bay Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Califf. Just so you know, we're not going to debate that right now.
No.
This is raising it to our awareness, so we'll take that offline, and if any members of council wish to bring forward a notice of motion or
Appreciate it.
have a conversation offline with staff, we'll dig into that.
Thank you.
But thank you also for just raising our awareness of the access issues and so forth there as well. So thank you for coming
Thank
in
you.
tonight.
All right.
All right, thank you. Have a good evening. And I believe we have one other registered. Mr. Gray is also. Oh, no, that's for a different item. Okay, perfect. Are there anybody who's online wishing to address council on any issue of interest to them? And I'm just, I think I see someone in our Zoom meeting I see a hand raised by a Shelby C. You may unmute, and if you just state your name and municipality of residence for the record, then and you have up to 3 minutes to address council.
Hello. Thank you, Your Worship, Mayor Murdoch. Can you hear me all right?
We can, loud and clear.
Okay. My name is Shelby Kane. I live in Oak Bay Municipality. And I'd like to bring forth an issue concerning public works. So I think the intersection of Kings Road at Foul Bay Road is in need of a pedestrian crosswalk. Foul Bay Road is very, very busy, as we all know. There's high levels of traffic going in excess of 50 kilometers an hour. And the intersection at Kings Road is right between two bus stops on opposite ends of the street. And those bus stops are that go up to UVic. And there are also two schools nearby, Oak Bay Secondary and Lansdowne Middle School. And I see children crossing there very frequently, and as well as other people. And I've seen people having to wait several minutes to be able to cross due to the very busy traffic. And I think jaywalking is pretty dangerous, and there's a chance that an accident could occur there, which would be very unfortunate. So I think it would be beneficial if a pedestrian crosswalk were put there. Again, this is Kings Road intersection at Foul Bay to ensure public safety and to protect the safety of children especially.
Thank you for coming in virtually here tonight to talk to us. Just the general process, because we don't typically give specific directions on specific intersections at this table, is to write to engineering at oakbay.ca, raise the question for them, and they would go do and undertake the study for that, and let you know where that's sitting in terms of our project queue. And at that point, depending on what the result of that is, you may want to come back and address us either just by email, or you can come back to this meeting again as well if you wish. But we would always rely on the engineering department to give us guidance on that, and so raising it to their attention would be the natural first step in that process.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you for coming in tonight. Is there any other members of the public who wish to speak to council on any items of interest to the community? I don't see any. I always go to staff just to make sure I'm not missing anything on my online piece here, but there's no other people who have called in and raised hit the *9 to indicate they wish to speak. I do not see any. So with that, then we will move on to the next item on the agenda. And that is just under new business, we have a grant and aid application that's come in as a late submission. And we have the applicant here, I understand. Mr. Gray is here to address us. Perhaps, I'm not sure if anybody in the room here, well, Mr. Payne is online. Perhaps, Mr. Payne, you can just give a quick overview of the process here that this body would undertake with a late application. This body obviously doesn't make decisions. We make recommendations to the council. So would the normal process tonight be to listen to this and then have this raised at the council meeting, or we make a recommendation here tonight. Perhaps just give us an update on the process for this this sort of application.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. That was a pretty good summary of the process. We do accept lead applications for council consideration in the case where there's some remaining budget after the initial awarding of grants. The initial awarding of grants occurred just recently with a deadline of January 31st. So we've received a grant application from the Mill Bay and District Conservation Society in the amount of $1,500. We've got approximately $5,500 remaining in the discretionary grant budget should council wish to approve such a request. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. And if there was a will of council to make a recommendation, that we'd have a motion at this table to recommend to council. I'm getting nods in the room here, so I'll just take that as the answer. Thank you very much. So with that, Mr. Gray, welcome to the meeting. Perhaps you could just state your name and municipality of residence for the record, and you have a couple of minutes to talk to us about your grant application. We do have the written application in front of us here as part of our agenda package. Welcome.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. You can hear me all right. I am Ken Gray, Secretary and Director of the Mill Bay and District Conservation Society. And as you said, you've got the application in front of you. I'll just run over it for everybody who's listening. Our Mill Bay and District Conservation Society is a nonprofit organization of volunteers that operate under the license from DFO to capture and relocate wild coho salmon in the Shawnigan watershed. We also provide broodstock to Shawnigan Lake School and Gulfstream hatcheries. The Gulfstream salmon fry are raised and eventually released into the Colquitts and Craigflower waterways. Our broodstock was instrumental in the recovery of those coho salmon runs, and we continue to respond to hatchery requests for more broodstock on a yearly basis to support up to 13 different projects in the Greater Victoria area. Oak Bay's Boker Creek will soon begin to receive chum salmon returns, and possibly coho salmon could be introduced in the years to come using Gulfstream fry salmon that originate from our broodstock. All donations to our society are needed for basic operations. None of our volunteers receive any monies except for gas refunds for trucks hauling live fish. Our major expense is our storage locker rental space to house all of our equipment. We are now advised that these costs will be increased by 30%, monies that we don't have. Consequently, we are trying to purchase a used 40-foot sea can container that will be hosted by on Shawnigan Lake School property at no cost to us. This acquisition will translate into a $9,600 expense for us. Our CVRD directors are pitching in monies, and we are asking the Greater Victoria municipalities that benefit from our volunteers' work to also consider giving us grant monies to make this happen so that we can continue to focus on providing our community service. Wild salmon are important to the West Coast, and our success rate continues to improve. We've been doing it since 1978. Last fall, we caught and transported over 7,300 fish. We have a website at www.mbdcs.ca that showcases our efforts. We were last year the #1 coho salmon enhancement project on the BC coast. There's a rush to move out of our now expensive rental storage facilities, so hopefully council can respond and advise us with minimal delay. We thank you for considering our financial assistance request.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gray, and thank you for coming in this evening. Are there any questions of Mr. Gray at this time? Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you so much, Mr. Gray, for your presentation and for your request. I had the pleasure of viewing both of the videos on your website, and I was fascinated, actually, at the source of the salmon and the amount of effort and work that you and your volunteers have been putting in. I had no idea that our chum salmon have been coming, or sorry, our small salmon have been coming from your facility up there, and I'm very pleased and look forward to supporting your grant application going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Are there any questions of Mr. Gray? I just, for my clarification, you mentioned that you primarily brood the coho salmon, And those are not currently the salmon that are being proposed for Bowker Creek, but they may be introduced in future. Is that correct?
It is my understanding through discussions with DFO and their historical records that Boker Creek was traditionally a chum and coho salmon stream. And then once urban development sort of laid waste to it, and now it's being rehabilitated. Chum salmon, they're trying chum salmon out first as the canary in the coal mine scenario. And then if it takes quite well, then they'll introduce coho salmon as a follow-up.
Great, thank you. And do we have a timeline for the introduction of the coho?
They are just introducing the chum salmon, which is a 4-year salmon. So in 2025, they should return because they're 2021 fish. So hopefully we will get a good return to Boker Creek in 2025. And at that time, we'll see how well they did as the returning salmon. And then anytime after that, coho could be introduced. And they may even introduce them before that.
Great, thank you. And the last question is just, are you making the application for grants from any other municipalities? Bowker goes through Victoria, Saanich, and Oak Bay. Just curious if there's other applications.
I did a presentation to Langford last week. They agreed to fund us somewhat. And I'm making a presentation to View Royal tomorrow night. A bigger presentation. I've got a lot more time to make a presentation to them.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, back to this table. Is there any recommendation of council that we can to move forward with something?
Would you like us to move receipt first and then, and the recommendation, or what would you like, how would you like this to be proceeded?
You could be, yeah, sure, we'll do a motion to receive.
Motion to receive, please.
Is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the receipt? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much.
And if it's the will of the council, I move the recommended $1,500 be recommended to council to approve.
There's no recommendation here. It's just, so your motion is to approve $1,500, yes?
To provide a recommendation to
Oh,
council.
recommendation to council, perfect, thank you.
Yes.
The move, is there a seconder for that amount? Moved and seconded. Is there a discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I very much appreciate this being brought forward, and obviously the organization and what they're doing is highly valued. I'm a little concerned about the line of sight between the current operations and the current impact to Oak Bay at this time. So there are potentially future effects and future impacts or future direct rollouts of the contribution of funding in the community, but none at this time and none for some years to come, with some hurdles to overcome. So even though we have a little bit of there is obviously some room in the grant and aid budget, I think that to my mind, it's more in keeping with the grant guidelines to keep that grant money set aside for local organizations who may need it in the upcoming year. I'm not in support of the work that's being done, but sort of following closely to the guidelines and wanting to retain as much discretionary funds moving forward for community organizations that may be directly working in the community. So I would not support this at this time. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Is there any other discussion? Councillor Braithwaite?
Yeah, I had the same thoughts when I was looking. I tried very hard because I would love to support this, but I looked at the funding policy, and I would agree with Councillor Appleton's comments. So I would have to vote against this at this time, but I would like to see them come back in the future.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Nate.
I guess my view on this is I don't disagree with the comments by the two previous councillors, but I also see that this is a one-time ask, and that although it doesn't render direct benefit to our municipality this year, I see myself quite able to look forward, because if we don't look down the stream, so to speak, then we're not going to get to the place we need to eventually. So supporting this group with the work they're doing, which I highly commend, it's terrific work, now creates the possibility for future opportunities for work in Bowker Creek. But if we don't support this, I mean, they may find other funding, but I do think it's directly related with some sort of a time lapse now. So I think that on this one, we have to widen the time frame within which we consider the nature of this work, and that should it not be able to complete at this end, then we never will realize the ultimate goal of this work. So I highly commend the work, and I think it fits adequately enough, and particularly given it's a one-off and you've got yourselves into a jam there, I would support this for that reason.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Yes, thank you. And I do value the work. It's absolutely critical to the health of salmon, and particularly to the future health of Bowker Creek. But I think in this case, I would agree with Councillors Appleton and Braithwaite that I think the grants and aid, we're not flush with cash in essence, and we try to keep it as a local focus in the short term. I realize that the salmon project will have benefits for us in the longer term, but I would encourage Mr. Gray and his organization to come back when we can see the sort of the light at the end of the tunnel that has direct impact on Oak Bay. It's such a difficult time, and there are so many needs, perhaps locally. So I will be unable to support this at this time, but I would encourage Mr. Gray to come back to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Councillor Zelka.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair. I think this is an absolute a critical example of something being better than nothing. I would not want to see the society somehow fold and this source of broodstock not be available to us in terms of the health of the creek going forward. Our creek, the creek here in Oak Bay. And I appreciate the fact that the proponent is asking for monies from all the regional local authorities involved, and I certainly commend them for that. If for somehow this $1,500 failed, I would hope that we would be able to maybe propose a smaller amount to see if that could be a success, would see some success. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Any other discussion? I'm a little torn on this one as well. I see the merits of supporting investment now to support likely future work. However, I am also, there's very much a certainty in the policy. It's not a binding policy. It tells us that these should be activities that are primarily, that's the word, benefit Oak Bay for these sorts of pieces. So I guess on the whole of this, in the limited amounts of funds we have left and the large number of community activities that may come forward, I'm hesitant to give the full $1,500 amount. I think spreading this out amongst other members of the Bowker Creek and other initiatives makes sense to me. I would be supportive of a lesser amount. I'm thinking maybe in the neighborhood of I think they're asking for $1,800 in total, so maybe $900 as covering half of their potential costs would be acceptable to me. But no, it's true, but their costs of the direct costs are $1,800. So I thought that would be a reasonable sort of, covering half the cost would be something I could support. I can't support the full $1,500, but just to let the body know that I would be supportive of a lesser amount if this motion fails. I don't see any other discussion. So on the motion, which is $1,500 to recommend to council approval, all those in favor and those opposed? I have Councillor Braithwaite, Appleton, Green, and myself opposed, so that fails. Is there a willingness to put a motion forward for a lesser amount, see if it succeeds? Can you put your microphone on, please, Councillor Ney?
I'll move a $900 sum for support.
Is there a seconder? Is it seconded? Is there further discussion on that? All right, I will call the question on that then. Recommended the $900. All those in favor? And those opposed? Councillor Braithwaite, Councillor Appleton, Councillor Green opposed. Thank you for that. So that will go forward as a recommendation to council for the $900. Thank you very much, Mr. Gray, for attending this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I believe we have hit the end of our, Councillor. I think we'd have a motion to adjourn as in order. Is there a seconder? Seconded, thank you. Should never interrupt someone making a motion to adjourn. It's just bad karma. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. That carries. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thanks, Councillor Green. Take care of yourself.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.